I recently went back to seminary for a third time. It's a long story there, but I had a master's in biblical and theological studies degree, and then I eventually went back and finished out a master's in divinity. I went to Phoenix Seminary in large part thanks to my church being very encouraging for me, and also some scholarship opportunities that the seminary made possible. So very thankful, very blessed for that. But I am in some ways then a seminary veteran, and I'm also a freshly graduated student at the same time. So I'm excited today to talk to Dr. John Schwandt, the President of Redemption Seminary, a non-traditional seminary that's doing some really interesting things to make seminary more accessible and more affordable for a lot of people. Prior to this role, John served as the Executive Director of Mobile Education for Faith Life, the company that makes Logos Bible software. So if you've ever done any of their online education programs, those kind of things, he had a role in creating those. And before coming to Faith Life, he also helped launch New St. Andrew's College, where he taught the first graduating class and continued to teach Greek, Latin, and the New Testament for 17 years. So he has decades of experience teaching online and developing distance educational curriculum. Well, recently I've gotten to know John a little bit through some online connections, and we even had some chance to meet in person as well. And he's a great guy. And as we were talking, we thought it would be fun just to have a conversation about our experiences and what people considering going to seminary should know and should think about before taking the plunge. And just so you know, I have no affiliation with Redemption Seminary. I am not receiving any money to talk about it. I just thought John was a good guy, and this is an interesting conversation to have. Well, hey, John, thanks for jumping on with me.
My pleasure. It's great to do this together. I just love to talk with you every chance I get. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So, God has these just incredible ways of just allowing our life experiences to just kind of shape us into the people that we are today. So I'm always just fascinated to just hear other people's stories. How has God just used some maybe pivotal moments in your life to shape you? So maybe you could just tell us a little about your story and how you got into seminary education.
So I rejected the faith. I grew up in a Christian family, but I rejected the faith in high school. Became an atheist and went to college. Joined a fraternity and loved to get into arguments with the Campus Crusade guys. But my mom always was praying for me and would tell me that she was praying for me. And the worst part about that is I didn't like it. And I realized that was not consistent with my atheism. I was the true atheist of there is no God and I hate him. And that bothered me that I couldn't just be neutral. And so God didn't let me go. I realized that there was just no rationality. There was no ground for rationality except for a triune creator. And so thankfully, he changed my heart, brought me back to him. And then I realized, well, I have a lot of learning to do. Although I grew up in a Christian family, I didn't really know my Bible that well. I don't think I read through the whole thing. And so after graduating college, and working as a landscape architect for a little bit, I decided I wanted to change my career and hobby. Decided I was going to be a philosopher. But before I went into philosophy, I wanted to get my theology really squared away. So I went to seminary, and that was a tall order for me because I didn't have a seminary background. And the toughest part was the language courses that they required, and thankfully they ended before I could fail. And so that just drove me to it. And I ended up graduating, and in the process, I fell in love with the Bible and I started teaching original Greek and I started teaching Latin. And the more I taught just the Bible itself, the more I fell in love with it and didn't want to go teach philosophy. And so I ended up teaching for about 20 years. And since I was a slow learner, that made me I feel like it made me a better teacher, and I was a problem solver. So eventually I pushed my lens towards the whole seminary project of what could make the seminary experience better for even somebody like me who didn't have a natural background in it. So that's what drove me to it. That's how the Lord kind of used it. I would have never imagined that this route for me. And now I've written books on biblical Greek, and I'm a complete
Yeah.
theology nerd.
So you went from barely passing to teaching it and writing books on it. Yeah. So that's pretty wild. They always say that the best way to learn something is to teach it. So I guess you just took that to heart. That's cool.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. Is the school was pursuing me, and I was telling them, look, they wanted me to teach languages. I said, look, I'm terrible at languages. And they said, "Well, that's okay. We can't pay you much." And so it sounds like a pretty fair deal. So I said, "Well, fine. If you want to inflict me on the students, I will learn along with them." And the students actually enjoyed that, and it really helped me uh, really not be afraid of asking any question. And that was a big part of what I learned at seminary, was not to fear questions.
Mm.
The Lord is God. He is the ultimate standard for truth. And so that it was that confidence that seminary really um, it really gave me. And I'm curious, you just
Yeah.
graduated from seminary as well, so I'm curious
I
about your
did. I did.
experience.
Yeah.
How would you answer those questions?
You were absolutely correct that the languages are the hardest. I'm with you there, man. Greek and Hebrew, man, that's brutal. But yeah, I mean, for me, I was blessed to be born into a Christian family. My family, both my parents became believers when they were in college, really, and it's through Campus Crusade for Christ back in the day. So I was the blessed recipient of their faith, where I was raised in church. My mom used to joke that I was born on a Sunday just in time for church, and uh, so
Perfect.
grew up going to church every single week. There kind of came that point where I was in junior high school years where I really started questioning my faith and saying, okay, is this really my own faith, or is this just my parents' faith? And so I struggled with it. I wrestled with it. But man, God just kind of had a grip on me from early on. So I grew up going to church, loving it. My mom ended up working at the church for many years as a music director. My dad was an elder at the church for many years. So I was there, 2, 3, 4, 7 days a week, just little church rat kid running around doing everything. But just loved it, fell in love with it. People started to invite me to volunteer in different things, started volunteering and helping. Actually got started leading worship in junior high and high school, doing that for many years. Thought I was going to be a worship leader, maybe be a Christian rock star, something like that. Uh, but then really just felt God's tug to go into ministry. Pastoral ministry. And so that kind of led me to go to Bible college, which was kind of my first introduction to the academic side of Christianity. And then later, after I'd been in ministry as a youth pastor for a long time, went to seminary because I was like, man, my theology, I got to get it straight. Because I'd taken some classes, but I had a lot to learn still. So went back and I did a master's in biblical and theological studies. And then after years of being out of that, thinking I'm good, I'll never go back to school, they wrote me back in to go finish up an MDiv. So I just finished that one up. So yeah, so it's been a journey, but man, every time I go through the process and just the grinder of seminary, I am thankful to be done, but I'm always glad I went through it because in that pressure of the academic, uh, process, you grow a lot and you learn a lot. And I'm definitely a better pastor for it on the other side of it. So
I'm fascinated by
uh,
that piece of it, because that's what I've been working on, actually reducing, is some of that pressure, or I would say stress.
mm,
It's I've been so redemption's based out on a apprenticeship model
yeah,
where you have mentors, and we just try to slow things down and have people, give people the space to learn without that pressure cooker. So I do think that
mm,
the rigor, you need to be pressed to dig deeply and not just
yeah,
settle for a superficial answer. So, and sometimes that can feel a little bit of pressure of like, that wasn't enough. I have to dig deeper, and I'm not sure what's under this stone.
yeah.
But how would do you think that the actual serious deadline or a high stakes exam, how do you think that's a necessary part or helpful part, or what's your view on that?
The only helpful part for me is that, I mean, you can learn everything you learn in seminary just reading books or talking to people or listening to podcasts or whatever. If you really really dig in and you've got the self discipline to do it. For me, it was just the you're under the gun now. You've committed to doing this. You have to do all these things to get the degree. So whatever it is they tell you to do, you have to do it. And so it kind of just forces you to go through it. Does the high pressure of it, help? I mean, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's really stressful. Sometimes I mean, be honest, you find yourself doing some assignments. You're like, why am I even doing this? What does this even matter? But you got to get the points, so you got to do it anyways. School works sometimes. So yeah, but my understanding is what you're doing at Redemption is kind of breaking the traditional mold a little bit. So maybe you could tell us a little about you recently. How long ago did you start Redemption Seminary, and kind of what makes it different? Because as we were getting to know each other, and I was talking to you about it, it's pretty fascinating. You guys are going a different route.
Yeah, well, we started in 2018 is when we launched and started really building the framework for it, and so that's pre-COVID. And so we were going online, trying to make it accessible, just tackling all the issues that keep people from enjoying the benefits of seminary, and hopefully opening it to a much bigger portion of the church. Because I really think that the more the church is educated and equipped, the greater the kingdom
Mm.
advancement will be. And so there are a lot of obstacles to the current model. I think it's built from a kind of a legal model where it's a weed out model rather than a weave in. And I understand some of that's good to protect. You want high quality product, but I don't think that a lot of the assumptions or a lot of the conclusions follow from some of those assumptions. So we started with an apprenticeship model where we wanted it to be high touch instead of online. In COVID, all the schools went online, and it became very correspondence.
Mm.
Just kind of you didn't have a lot of interaction with the any instructor. They were just grading papers, and so we didn't want that. We looked at we knew that would be a temptation, and we saw some schools already doing that. We wanted to be different, so we wanted it. An apprenticeship. It's not you know correspondence. It's really hands on. So we wanted the learning to take place where a student, where ministry happens everywhere, whether they're just leading small groups, whether they're in children's ministry, whether they're a pastor, whatever the Lord has called them to. If they could marry their theological study to their activities, they're really going to learn it much better and ask
Mm.
so much more applicable questions. So that's why I keep saying apprenticeship, the in context
Yeah.
learning.
So tell me a little bit about that apprenticeship. What do you mean by that? Is it, you got somebody kind of overseeing you? You have interaction with the professor. What exactly does that kind of look like, and why did you go on that model? You kind of explained it a little bit, but tell me a little bit more details.
The way we approach that problem or issue was to have recorded lectures and the readings like you would expect. Recorded lectures from notable scholars.
Mhm.
And then we rounded up a bunch of professors with teachers' hearts. And a lot of times those aren't the same teachers that are great in front of a lectern or great orators. So a true mentor they have a doctorate, but they are student focused. They want to spend time understanding the context of the student and look at how they're applying what they're getting out of that study. So we have a workbook approach for every course. So I
Mm.
guess the general model is you watch some videos, you read some readings associated with those, then you're asked some questions, and we always provide the rationale for the questions. Like, why are we having you do this? So that everybody knows there's a purpose for it.
Mm.
And you answer those questions. We try to keep those applicable. And then there's 7 units to every course, so you meet 7 times with a mentor, and they review that work. And that's why it needs to be one-on-one, because you're applying that theology to your context, and so it doesn't work well in a class situation at all. And
Mm.
so that's where this apprenticeship idea comes in. It's our version of having someone who is experienced stand alongside somebody who is learning something new, having this new digging in deeper to theology, but applying it newly to their calling and getting some feedback on that. And
Mm.
so they just look to make sure that it's on track with the grade book. It's a lot like piano lessons,
Yeah.
where you bring your work in every week and you're told, "Yep, it looks great," or actually bring that song back or that part back next week, and we'll keep going. But we'll keep you on track that way.
Yeah, my experience in ministry is I was especially when I first got started, I always thought, somebody's gonna mentor me. They're gonna take me under their wing and tell me everything I need to know, and they're just gonna they're gonna see this potential that I have and want to come and shape me. And it never happened. No one came, And then I realized, okay, it's because people are busy and they got other things going on and whatever. So if you don't seek out that apprenticeship or that mentorship or that experience with somebody else who knows what they're doing, you often don't get that. So it sounds like you're kind of creating an opportunity for people to say, I need to grow. I can find somebody who's going to help apprentice me and walk me through these studies and be there for me. So that's good.
Yeah, it's really ironic that in the brick and mortar model, a lot of times that can feel there's a lot of distance between you and the instructor. You might get
Mhm.
some office hours, but there's not a lot of interaction. And so, we're 100% online, truly distance, but it's high touch. There's a lot of interaction.
Yeah.
You're applying it in context. So the distance between the learning, it's actually really immediate. So I'm not sure if
Yeah.
these terms are even the right terms for
Mhm.
what's going on.
That's good. So what do you say are some of the biggest obstacles that a lot of seminary students are facing? And then I know Redemption's trying some things to overcome those. So what would you say, like the average student? What are the biggest obstacles for somebody who's wanting to go to seminary, thinking about going to seminary, but they're just like, I don't know if I can even do that because this just seems insurmountable.
Yeah, well, I think back to when I was thinking about it, and this is what I hear from a lot of people. There's two big things that come up. One is this realistic for my life? Is this going to wreck my life? Am I signing up for something that's just too big, or even one course? Is it going to, I already am very busy. I feel the Lord's calling me in lots of areas. How does this fit? Flexibility or just the ability to the accessibility of the whole program. Does it fit in a real life? So that's one obstacle. The other one
Mhm.
is part of that would be cost.
Yeah.
Does it fit within my budget? So those are the two things we took on right from the beginning of seeing the only way we can address both of those is actually changing the model, because the traditional brick and mortar model pulls people away. They have to uproot their lives. It's a major risk.
Yeah.
So making it 100% online, you don't have to. Basically, we try to take all risk out of it. People can just try one course. They can audit a course. They can take, they can choose a non-graded route, and then if they want to get graded later, while they're working through all the materials, we provide all the materials. We use Logos Bible software. Oh,
Yeah.
that's I actually, people might know me from that. If you click on a Greek word in Logos, that's my voice in there. That's
You're the one reading it?
yeah, reading it or
This
just
is the
on any
face,
word.
okay. I didn't know that, I use that all the time because 'cause I'm always like, "I have no idea how to pronounce that word. I remember learning it somewhere."
That's me.
Right on,
So
right on.
so so unfortunately, now you connected a face to that voice. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry
I'm
about
gonna picture your
that.
face now every time I click on one of those when I'm trying to figure out how to pronounce that word.
So so yeah, we include all the materials and some
Yeah.
training for them. And so it really someone can toe in the water, without having to make a
Mhm.
huge decision. And then we basically, because we don't have a campus, we are super lean. Everything we do is to make it affordable for students. So we're about a third the cost of a normal
Yeah,
seminary. So a whole master's program is 13,000, but like a non-graded course is just over $400. So you can move from 400 to that whole program, which includes all the materials. You get to keep logos after you're done as well.
that's cool. Yeah, and we failed to mention that you were, the executive director of mobile education at Faith Life for a long time. Is that the right title? I
That's
I was
right.
looking at your bio there, making sure I got it right.
Yeah.
Which is the company that makes Logos Bible software for everybody who's watching who doesn't know, which I'm a huge fan of. I use it all the time, and so that has really influenced your uh, your thinking when it comes to redemption, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we brought in uh, super notable scholars, who were just kind of the go-to scholars at lots of different seminaries, and we had them record their courses
Mm.
for people who didn't want to leave their church family, and take that course, that type of course. So we produced like over 200 courses while I was there working for them, and that's what I was brought in to do. And then I wanted to have that be accredited so people could actually earn accredited degrees for that. So I pitched it to lots of different seminaries, this whole model, but it only works, with that high touch
Hmm.
piece and at a distance. So it was just too disruptive for the established seminaries to consider.
Hmm.
So I actually got permission from, all I'm friends with a lot of seminaries out there. It's all kingdom work. So
Yeah.
they said, "Do you mind if we try this and see if it takes off?" It seems to be taking off. We have more than 150 students. We've had students now since 2020.
Mm.
So we're in our third year of graduates now, and yeah, I'm happy to share the model with any other seminary that wants to take it on as well. Because the students really, it resonates with them, and the mentors, the
Yeah.
instructors love it because they're speaking into people's lives. And there's a lot of people with theological doctorates out there. Next year we're gonna have a doctorate as well, so our graduates can
Mm.
move on and become mentors.
That's
And so
cool.
this whole model actually provides a lot of work for people instead of just being limiting who can be a professor to like 7 to 10 people at a seminary. We need lots because it's all one-to-one work.
Right on. And so, you mentioned the cost being prohibitive for a lot of people. I know that was a big thing for me at seminary. Like going back, one of the only reasons I went back, to just be upfront, is I got an offer for a good scholarship that I was like, okay, this is a really good opportunity. But there were so many years where I was like, man, I would love to go back, but this the cost. And in ministry, you're not in it for the money. We're not rolling in cash unless you're flying a private jet somewhere. But that's very few pastors. So lowering the bar of entry for many people who, if they're smart, you don't want to get tons of debt going into ministry, or even a lot of
Right.
people, they're doing it, they're getting an education just because they're serving in a high capacity in their church and want to learn more, want to be more useful to the kingdom. And so they're not going to be, making any return necessarily on this investment. Other than investing their own dollars into their own personal growth, so to lower that barrier is a big deal. So that's cool that you're finding other ways to do that.
We want this to be student funded so that it's scalable and doesn't rely on donors to exist. But we definitely are pursuing donors to offer scholarships, especially to nations that don't have the same economy that we
Mhm.
have. We have mentors worldwide. Works great for a lot of missionaries. We just haven't built our donor base yet, but we're not dependent upon that.
Mhm.
We want to make sure that we don't get ourselves into that problem, and really so that people can donate to things that where there's true need.
Yeah.
And I think students should be able to pay their way, but it should be accessible. And so our target was kind of a used car price payment that people could stop or start whenever they needed and work
Mhm.
their way through and make it as long as they want. I think another issue though was the stress. We started talking about that a while ago, and I find it funny, especially with spiritual discipline courses, or sometimes they call it spiritual formation.
Yeah.
Any seminary course can has the danger to wreck your spiritual life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
And
And
it's
that's so
ironic.
ironic. Yeah, that is so ironic.
Yeah, so I mean that's a good sanity check.
Mhm.
Are we is our model actually helping the the people involved in the process? And so that's why we went with this workbook approach rather than exams. And we have a capstone project where people work on some project that they're doing in their ministry, but we don't have massively long papers. It's always
Mm.
sequential questions in a workbook. That helps that lower that stress, is you only have to think about the next step.
Yeah.
It also helps with another danger would be procrastination, where you have a completely flexible work at your own pace model. There's a danger that people will just kind of slow down and not make progress. But I heard somewhere, and this seems to be true in my life, that procrastination isn't a metric of laziness, but it's one of complication. So we tend to
Mm.
procrastinate on things that are just complicated.
Yeah.
I have other I don't want to open that box because it's just going to open so many other things.
Mhm.
And it's not because people are lazy so much. It's too complicated. So that's where this
Yeah.
workbook approach really helps people make consistent progress. and
Yeah.
I think adds some structure to if people can do it for their Bible study time, or like every other Bible study time, just add some structure to it,
Yeah.
and it seems that you can make some headway.
Yeah, because for me, I found that some of the best students in seminaries are the ones who kind of take that approach to their studies, even though they don't have to. They're kind of every day, I'm going to do a little bit towards that. I know I got a paper due in a month. That's a big one, and I'm not going to wait till the last minute to do it. And so they kind of just slowly, sequentially do it. But you got to kind of do it all on your own because you could just sit there and, you know, not that I've ever done this before, but write that paper the night before and get it, C's get degrees, it's good enough. Here we go. But really having that more sequential process really does help. It breaks it down in more bite size, but it also makes it more manageable and helps you learn. Because if you try to dump everything into the last second, I mean, you're not going to retain as much as when you're, doing a process every single day, growing and learning.
In your story, we meet a lot of pastors that kind of went pro out of high school, and just started pastoring,
Hmm.
never even went to college. I know that you did, but we have a lot of people that have come back saying, "Look, I've been a pastor for 30 years, and
Hmm.
I need some touchstones just to kind of look
Yeah.
sideways of what theologically, am I in the fairway or not, or
Yeah.
where sometimes I want to push the limits, but where are those limits?"
Sure.
So, we do have some of those, but, you did this in stages. What were some of the
Mhm.
benefits that you experienced for, doing all this work to get a seminary degree?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, I think just some of the forced work to condense the time of what I would have normally done on my own, maybe, or even pushing me to do things I wouldn't do, was good. Would I have sat down and read entire systematic theologies on my own? Maybe, but probably would have been more like in time, like, okay, I really need to know this one little topic, so I'll find that chapter and index it or whatever. But so forcing you to kind of go through and like go through the whole thing of something that's maybe a little bit
Mhm.
more heady, that it requires some work to work through it, to stretch your brain a little bit. I mean, that was a big part for me, and yeah, pushing me to do that and to condense it into a time frame where I'm really doing a lot of learning fast. I'm really taking in a lot of volume, I guess I should say, of reading and the materials. I think was helpful for me, and really just exposing me to stuff I didn't know. I didn't know. I mean, I thought that everything I had, I grew up in church. I read the Bible a bunch of times. I know what I'm talking about, and then I realized I'd never actually done a lot of the deeper thinking that it required to get through school. And really, it's been a huge benefit to me because now I'm a pastor, so I've got people coming into office every day. I've got people calling me on the phone all the time. We get phone calls at the office and whatever, and there's always questions coming up, theological questions that I was not prepared to answer. Just coming out even Bible college. I mean, it's maybe a few, but seminaries really helped me just kind of learn a lot of these more difficult questions and how to grapple with them. And even if I don't remember exactly like the perfect answer for it, I've got to like, hey, I've heard this, and I know where to go, kind of, and I can help get people where they need to go to give them a good theologically grounded answer, rather than just being like, well, I don't know, that's a good question. So that's been a huge help to me, but also just in my own, just the depth of my preaching, the depth of my teaching. Learning the language is one of the hardest things, but also really opens up some of your understanding to scripture too. So there's so many different things like that it's been invaluable for me just in my growth. But yeah, going through the process of it slowly. I don't know if I'd recommend that to everybody, but that's the way my situation worked out. Where now I'm, finally finished up the MDiv, and I've been in ministry for a long time, but I was able to take my experiences to it, which helped. But I'll tell you what, the process of getting through seminary is one of the hardest things ever, and doing it while working full time at a church. Thankfully, my church was very gracious with me while I was going through it. But I got two kids and a wife, and so trying to keep up with schedules and that. I mean, I hit a whole new level of busyness and productivity, and things I never knew I could even reach. I can see how people could completely burn out. I'm a pretty driven, self motivated guy, really organized, so that's the only way I was able to survive it. But there were days where was like, I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if that's a positive of seminary, but it's a reality of it for sure.
I definitely think, that's a good those are positives, and the, one thing I heard was that, it seemed like, well, I was hearing that your confidence, elevated as well as your humility. And I think
Yeah.
that's a paradox. That's a really good
Yeah.
test for success in
Yeah.
seminary and spiritual growth does equal elevation of confidence and humility.
No, that's great. Yeah, because there's a lot of people who come out of seminary or they go to education, they get really puffed up ego-wise, thinking they have all the answers. But if you're really doing theology right, you're coming out more humble than ever, realizing how how low you are and standing to God and also in your knowledge.
And you have to have that that confidence to be able to ask a true question and to really to say, I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that, and be okay with not no waiting on the Lord. And I think that's a big part of what I got out of my seminary experience.
Yeah.
There's a lot of I don't knows, but I'm seeing the faithfulness of the Lord in all of this, and I can I know that I will eventually.
There are some things that, just being honest, there's some things you can learn in seminary, and there's some things that you just can't learn in seminary. So, just thinking realistically for prospective students or people thinking that seminary is a silver bullet to make them perfect. What is it that you think people can learn from seminary, and what is it that you just have to go out and do it? I mean, we could probably make a huge list, but what would you say is like seminary is going to give you this, but here's some things that you still going to have to go learn on your own or do that.
Well, a lot of that is going to differ person to person. And I would say one thing that gets overlooked in traditional seminary programs is that application
Mhm.
point. So they're really good at teaching theology or facts, information, and structures, theological structures, relationships.
Mhm.
But then to get that relationship to how it affects me personally, or me and my relationships, or my church, or what I'm going to do with that, and that's what you were talking about. That puffing up that happens,
Mhm.
um, and so that application of theology to actual ministry, to real people, um, is a is has been just a perpetual problem for, I guess, the monastic view of seminary
Yeah.
or structure of it, where everyone leaves and goes to the special place, and then they don't, but if everyone learns in context, you're going to start. That's when you start realizing knowing what you don't know, because
Yeah.
you're there. And,
Yeah.
you have somebody who's having a faith crisis asking questions that you never thought about. And there's lots of ways to, address that. You could and a lot of times the best way to address it isn't having the right theological presentation of of points of soteriology, but is just being there, and having that, I'd say a foundational piece of theology is God with us. And
Mhm.
we're extensions of God's families to each other. And so being there with someone in that moment, you could speak to this a lot better than I could, because I actually haven't done the frontline work of being a pastor. But when you're there with someone who's, has, I've had some relatives die, I've been with them, but as a
Mhm.
pastor, you get a lot more of that,
Yeah.
or in the high points too. Um, and so seminary, isn't the best for those, but if you can link what you're learning to seminary to those points, and that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to do, that's where I think some real benefit happens. But
Yeah.
it definitely nothing substitutes for walking in the faith, walking with, the Lord in fellowship, with other Christians. I mean, there's wisdom, with others that seminary can kind of give you some context, gives
Yeah.
you some extra steps in the process. But that there's something about, I love talking to people with a lot of gray hair, the patience they have and what they've seen. It's just, some of that you just need time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things about the seminary model that can really trip people up sometimes is especially if you have to be on ground. if you're moving from across the country to go to a certain seminary or whatever, and a lot of people do that for good reason because there's a certain professor they want to study under, or there's a good school they need to get to, or whatever, and they don't have the same resources near them. The danger is there's a lot of people who maybe they go right out of college straight into a seminary, and they're completely disconnected from churches. They go to the seminary, and if they don't get plugged into some sort of ministry context, working in their church, serving in a church to a high capacity, you're getting all this knowledge and you're getting puffed up because you think you know everything, and you're getting very idealistic. This is how a perfect everything should be, and I've got a whole system for all of it. But I see so many students that way who you can pinpoint the ones that aren't in the trenches doing high capacity volunteer roles, or working at a church somewhere, because they're not getting that hands-on experience. And so, yeah, there's something you just can't teach about that. You can preach a sermon maybe once or twice in a preaching class, and that's not enough. You got to keep getting reps. You got to keep getting out there and doing things. You can answer a few theological questions, but it's not going to teach you how, to go into somebody's home after a loved one committed suicide, and how do you do that? I mean, you just get thrown into the fire in ministry. And so, yeah, so there's the knowledge that's helpful, but then if you don't pair that with the application, you're gonna be in some serious trouble if you're gonna be working in ministry, especially especially people who are wanting to be full time in ministry, and even if you're just wanting to serve the church well. So that's why I like the idea of the apprenticeship model, where you can say, I can stay in my church context, I can keep working here at this church that I'm currently in. I don't have to move across the country if there's not a good seminary nearby. Before we run out of time here, just one last question for you. Maybe this is a big one too, but uh, for anyone who's a prospective seminary student, or maybe somebody who's even in the middle of seminary, just what are your best tips for somebody who's been in education for a long time in different capacities? Best tips, if you want to go to school, maybe what's your best tips, and then if you're in school, best tips for getting through the process.
Well, a lot of what you were talking about is kind of building that habit, learning a lifestyle habit that is uh, sustainable. And if it's not, then yeah, then you have to, you don't want to continue to press yourself and grind yourself down, because you're not going to get good grades. You're not going to, it's not going to actually, you're not going to really grow that much. And so much of seminary isn't information. It's kind of learning the process of how to get to the information, and how to
Mm,
approach answers to the questions, or even know what questions to ask. That's probably the biggest one, and that's probably the one I would put out there, because you tend to overlook that. Am I asking the right question?
mm,
If you're thinking about seminary, or thinking about learning seminary, or thinking about going to seminary, to prepare for that. I mean, once assuming that you found a seminary that you want to go to, the best way to prepare is to, I would say, just start, get it, look at the syllabus, get a course catalog, find the readings, just start
yeah.
working ahead and try to figure out what are the most important questions. If you could boil that course down into the top three questions that course really wants to answer, or that you want to get out of that course, it's going to
Mm,
be way more meaningful than just kind of being strung along, with each assignment, if it's not very clear of the objectives for it. And then for students that are in seminary, think about what's sustainable. I think when I went through, I only had so much time, and there were some courses that I just didn't get out what I should have, just because I only had so much funds. I could only be away from work for so long. And so, yeah, we ought to make choices like
yeah.
that. That's one reason we're trying to make seminary flexible. But to map out your own program, even on a flexible program, I think it's very good to map out your plan for completing everything, and and realize that's your first draft of the plan, because you're going to have to revise it, and recognize that the boundaries of human frailty, and not despise that. but know that the Lord's teaching you with that, and that's a good lesson I've been working on this year. Actually, is anytime I'm in a struggle, first question I need to be asking is, "What's the Lord's teaching me in this?" There's something here,
Yeah.
and usually that kind of recenters my attitude a little bit, my disposition, and yeah, I end up learning something.
That's some really good advice. For me, like when I first got my syllabus in every class, I'm a very structured person, but I have to be. It's the only way I survived it, like I was saying earlier. So it was, I would get out, I'm an Apple guy, so I'd get out my reminders app and I get my calendar out and I would put every single assignment in my reminders app in the due date that it's due. And then I would even go a step further and say, okay, not just when is the assignment due, but I'm going to schedule when I need to start working that assignment or when I need to have when I need to do certain things in order to get to that due date. And it took hours, but then I was ready, done for the semester. And every time I just sat down, like, okay, what should I be working on? I could just pull that up. Okay, oh, this is the next things that I need to get doing. That was a huge help for me. So I hear you there. Just the more you can plan it out, the better. Not everybody's that way. I might be a little extreme in some ways, uh, but I that's a huge tip right there.
Yeah, actually, that was mentioned in a book, "Surviving and Thriving," in seminary. I think they mentioned that almost the exact same tip. So it's a proven tip, and you
Yeah.
did well to map that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, redemption's a little different in that we don't have the deadlines,
Right.
except when you decide, okay, I'm going to have 7 meetings with a mentor. So students still, I think it's still good to map, like,
Mhm.
decide how long do I want to work on this? Do I want to
Sure.
do it for a few weeks or a few months? And
Yeah.
so they have this map of what they're, a pacing for
Yeah.
when they're going to get through the workbook material and sign up for that mentoring. So regardless of the model, I think that's a really uh, good way to budget your time, and that
Mm.
enables you to budget time for your family and
Sure.
yourself, and which is important.
Yeah, especially if you're busy in school, if you're working another job, even if you're not going to be in full-time ministry, but you're just volunteering at the church and want to grow. Like, yeah, you've got to block out, budget that time. Like, when am I going to work on this? What works in my schedule? For me, I always had to have like, okay, this is my seminary day. I'm blocking this out. I'm putting in my calendar. Anybody asks me to do something, I already have a prior commitment. I have something I have to do that time. Something's already on my calendar, and it's true, even if it's just with yourself. but but that was always a huge help for me too. Just yeah, I like the way you said that, budgeting your time well.
One other thing comes to mind is
Mm,
that, to celebrate the victories too. It's so
yeah,
easy. I There's a lot of courses that I just forgot about after, decades ago. But the ones that I do remember are ones where I did celebrate. I really felt like, wow, the light bulb really went on there, and I wrote it many places. I could put a bumper sticker on that course of, this is what I got out of that course. So if you can
yeah,
get a bumper sticker for every course of, this is, maybe it could be not even what the course was about, but if there is something that was pivotal and meaningful to you, that
mm.
is also, I think, real helpful.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, celebrate those wins, especially every little step, every class you finish, every assignment that's done. It's like that's one more step towards the big goal. But so that's great. Well, John, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you for jumping on with me, and I've had a pleasure getting to know you a little bit here, and excited to hear what you're doing at Redemption Seminary, and anything else anybody should know, or where they can get in touch. How can, if anybody wants to look into Redemption Seminary, what do they need to know?
Well, redemption.edu. So yeah, we're accredited, so we have that edu extension. And I love the name. We are non-traditional, redeeming the days, redeeming the time in life. There's a lot the Lord has for us, if we're available. More than I think we can always be surprised with what the Lord has for us, and how He can enable us and equip us to help others. So redemption.edu. There's plenty of places to contact us. We're very easy to get a hold of. No robots. It's very high touch at every level. So we'd love to hear from anyone.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Likewise.